Coming to you live from Johannesburg over the next half an hour. An in-depth look at the big local, international and African stories that are shaping our world this evening. This is Tonight with Jane Dutton. Now, you're looking at the ANC's policy document on sexual harassment. That's right, there's absolutely nothing here at all. We're known as one of the rape countries of the world, and yet the ruling party does not have a position on this, nor do many other political parties and businesses. How is this even possible? South Africa's oil discovery off Mossel Bay, it's massive, 5 times bigger than any other find. Could it help turn our economy around, or does it bring violence and poverty? We discuss the oil curse afflicting many developing countries and what we can do to avoid it. And why are our policemen killing themselves? Checkpoint investigates South Africa's suicidal cops and asks whether the force could be doing a better job at putting a stop to it. Another crippling strike hangs over the mining sector. Trade union AMCU is calling for a secondary strike in the platinum and coal sectors. This is in response to Sibanye-Stillwater's announcement that it might retrench thousands of workers at its gold mines.
AMCU is calling on all responsible shareholders who invest in Sibanye-Stillwater to disinvest immediately and send a clear signal to Froneman that he cannot crush the livelihoods of black mine workers and the communities that feed the mines.
An economist at National Treasury has detailed the impact of Nhlanhla Nene's removal as finance minister in 2015. Catherine McLeod says the markets would have reacted differently if someone else other than Des van Rooyen had been appointed. McLeod was testifying at the state capture inquiry.
If somebody else, not Minister van Rooyen, was put in that position, if that individual were associated with the state capture project in any way, then I think even if they were seen to be a good investor, I think there would be question marks raised about it. After Nenegate, Minister Gordhan was reappointed as finance minister, and because of the continued pressure that Minister Gordhan remained under, which investors saw, there was still pressure on financial asset prices. So you can see again there with the rand-dollar exchange rate, there was still pressure.
SARS is making a move to seize movable properties belonging to controversial businessman Adriano Mazzotti. The Revenue Service has obtained a warrant of execution in the North Gauteng High Court. It's understood it's for the payment of 33 million rand plus interest, which SARS claims Mazzotti owes it in terms of the Customs and Excise Act.
Late last year sometime, we introduced a new unit within our environment, and this unit is called the Illicit Economy Unit. And in a nutshell, it's responsible for investigating syndicated tax fraud. Now, so this unit, since its establishment, has been hard at work, busy with various investigations throughout the country. And so, you know, in its work, of course, it is responsible for ensuring that we collect whatever revenue that is due to the fiscus, and ensuring that whatever non-compliance that there is in terms of the tax laws, that such taxpayers are brought to book.
At least 10 experts are set to testify in defence of Caster Semenya. It's day 2 of a landmark legal battle involving the star athlete. Semenya appeared in a Swiss court yesterday, but there was drama from the word go. The world body released a list of expert witnesses. Semenya's lawyers slammed that move, saying it swayed public opinion. They have now released their own list, which includes 5 experts, all based in the UK. Amongst them, a professor who spent a decade analysing whether officials should regulate female athletes with high testosterone levels. We'll have more news for you at 9, but now we turn to our special segment on the state of sexual harassment policies. It came as a shock over the weekend when we learned that the country's ruling party has no such policy. None. In a country rife with sexual harassment, the EFF and the IFP are no better. They also don't offer protection against sexual harassment. The two exceptions are the DA, who adopted an extensive policy last year, and Patricia de Lille's recently created Good Party. As it turns out, our provincial legislatures also don't have any rules in place. This was the ANC's response yesterday.
The only case that was outstanding was the one of sexual harassment, which said earlier this year, evidence was submitted by both parties, and after a due consideration by the panel, after each of the parties made their final submissions, it was established that there was no case of sexual harassment against Pulemabe, and his matter was cleared. And so far, because there is a system problems that was also established by the panel about the ANC, is that within 3 months from now, we should have a fully fledged policy on sexual harassment policy, which all staff members of the ANC as well as leaders needs to be educated on.
And earlier, ENCA conducted a quick poll on Twitter that showed that 22% said no, that their companies did not have a sexual harassment policy. 45% said yes, they did, and the rest didn't know. Now, we're hearing of one sexual harassment case after another. The Dullah Omar Institute has listed 20 recent cases involving politicians and leaders from across the spectrum. There are, of course, many more. I'm joined from our Pretoria studio by Vuyiselo Botha, gender activist and founding member of the South African Men's Forum. And it's a pleasure to have you, Mr. Botha. Why are we so bad at this?
Well, Jane, thank you for the invitation. I think it's sad that, and it's disappointing that, 25 years into our democracy, and by the way, let's not forget that the ANC is 107 years old, that it's a leading member of society. I mean, it has laws that are progressive relating to gender, and we're living in a country, as you rightly point out, in a country that is considered to have the highest rate of gender-based violence and sexual harassment in the world. Now,
it's a real statement. Just if I can pick up on that point of yours. I mean, you say that, and yet nothing's been done. So it just shows that it's not taken seriously. Do you think those figures, those numbers, actually are understood?
Well, I think it sends a message that, look, sexual harassment, Jane, is not taken as a serious matter. And that should be a grave concern for all of us, because then what does it say? And because we know that, look, Jane, sexual harassment, it has a context, and the context is about power. And that is why when you look at the recent Pulemabe case, it is very important for all of us as South Africans, Jane, to remember that it's about power relations in our country, in the world, that sexual harassment does not happen, by, men who are powerless. It does, or it's perpetuated by men who are powerful, who are resourceful, and it is within that context, Jane, that all of us as South Africans must understand that, look, sexual harassment, it's not a laughing matter, because women who in the majority are at the cold phase of sexual harassment, would spend, years, some in hospital because of depression, because of anxiety, and the level of production at work goes down, Jane.
Okay, I was going to ask you more about where this leaves a victim if there is no policy. I mean, what sort of legal recourse do they have? You say, obviously, it affects them mentally, psychologically, but what power do they have if there's no policy in place?
Well, I think that if there would be a legal recourse, I guess, that, Jane, a complainant, if the internal processes has been exhausted and is not quite happy about the outcome, could go and approach court of law.
But I should imagine it must be quite hard to take that avenue when you know that your company is not supporting you.
For sure, because then what it does is there's a stigma also. There's also isolation. There's also a perception that, look, I may be wrong, where a survivor of sexual harassment, you then begin, Jane, to blame yourself that, in fact, I caused it, or, in fact, I brought it upon myself. So it's always important that when such cases are looked at, that this context is that, look, sexual harassment, it's all about power dynamics. It's all about us as men who remain, Jane, people who are powerful in positions, people who would also surround by what I call, with your self-defense, where you'd have men around you who will, in fact, see nothing wrong. So in that context, then the survivor is isolated, is stigmatized, and then there is a possibility, a high likelihood that the survivor then begins to blame herself that, look, in fact, I don't think that it's about him, it's about me.
Okay. And I mean, I was shocked to read that even provincial legislators don't have this policy in place. I mean, these are the people that should be putting this into law in the first place. When you've got that happening, when you've got the ruling party, many other parties, many businesses not taking this seriously, why should other smaller businesses possibly take this on?
But Jane, I want you and I and the viewers not to forget that, I mean, the legislator, the companies are a mirror of this society. That when you have legislators who are there, who are supposed to be an embodiment of ensuring that there's justice, they themselves come from communities that don't think that, number one, violence against women, it's important, it's critical. So they are, in fact, a reflection of this society. So, in fact, it would be naive of us to think that they would act differently. But
okay, so what do we do?
Jane, is
how do we put a stop to this? How do we make sure that this changes?
Well, I think it's important that we mobilize, we continue to galvanize men, we continue to, I mean, what we're doing now and the work that different sectors are doing on issues of gender-based violence, we continue to do it. I mean, for me, Jane, it's about education, that we don't get tired, but also it's that we must focus. And I keep on emphasizing, Jane, we must focus on working with men and boys because it is us, men, who are perpetrators, that women don't rape themselves, women don't sexually harass themselves. So the elephant in the room is that at the Tuli House, it's important that men there in leadership, they not only get trained in the letter, but also the spirit of what it means to be sexually harassed as an employee or as a woman in South Africa.
Well, thank you, Mossel Bay, for being as vocal as you are, and I admire the work that you do. Thank you. Up next, wet gas is found in Mossel Bay with the potential to secure South Africa's energy future. We delve into the dark side, African countries whose wealth of natural resources, especially oil, has plummeted them into conflict and poverty.